So after all that gloom and doom, let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, which are generally a little bit more positive than some of the other situations that we've been discussing. So what are the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals that the UN set out in 2015. So the idea is that they are meant to be achieved by 2030. So I will post a link to the actual Sustainable Development Goals so that if you're interested, you can take a closer look at them. This little chart just shows a kind of an abbreviation of them. So, well, if you look at this, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, and so on and so forth. They all look like they are very desirable goals. But how do we achieve them? As I mentioned before, if we want no poverty, what cost does that come at? What do maybe some other people have to sacrifice? And I'm not saying you can't do it, but I am saying that we need to consider what that means. Zero hunger, how do we achieve that? What are the real costs to achieving zero hunger? We already saw the costs of the Green Revolution. How do we change the way that we do things so that we can provide food for everyone? So one of the things that I'd like to talk a little bit about is co-benefits. Now, one of the things when you're thinking about solutions to sustainability problems, I'd like you to think about is co-benefits. People like co-benefits, and I mean, they like them for a good reason because they make a lot of sense. I'll talk a bit about something that I have some experience in because I did a lot of research on education for girls and the benefits to not only the girls who are getting educated, but towards society more generally. So one of the Sustainable Development Goals is for quality education, and what that means is education for everyone on the planet. So what I learned when I was researching education for girls was that the benefit from educating girls rippled throughout society. You not only had girls who had more opportunity when they graduated from school, they had the ability to get potential jobs and be more independent both from their families and from the expectation of getting married at a young age. So they had independence. But they didn't just have independence. They gained more respect in their communities. And over time, they and other girls and women were more respected by the men around them and by their families. This meant a number of things. They were given more decision-making power. And when they had more decision-making power, decisions were made differently within the communities. There was a greater emphasis placed on health, for example, particularly for children. And children whose parents both had an education then were more likely to be educated themselves as they grew up. Girls who were educated tended to have better access to birth control and protection from STDs and HIV and so on, because they were more respected and they had the power to say no if they didn't want to have sex, or if they wanted to have protected sex, they were more likely to be listened to when they had an education. They could make more decisions in their own lives, and in their own lives, generally that meant that they would choose to stay in school longer, and they would choose to start their families, get married later in life, and start their families later in life. So ultimately, they ended up having fewer children. Now, if you look at some of the models by the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the models, several of the models strongly suggest that if we can educate more girls around the world, that will naturally put downward pressure on population. So rather than coercing people to have fewer children, people will naturally want to have fewer children. That was certainly my experience when I was involved in some of these programs in sub-Saharan Africa, and when I talked to girls and women. And it was, it was really interesting to see firsthand these enormous ripples from just this one thing. We do this one thing, and it helps so many people and makes, well, not to sound too corny, but the world a better place. What's another example of that? Well, I think we see that in issues of climate change. For example, if we can change our transportation habits, one of the ways we might be able to convince people to take more public transit, or to, walk within the community more, or to ride your bike and so on. People aren't too responsive to the idea, well, you can cut back your carbon footprint. Most people don't really get what that means, and it's kind of, well, I'd much rather take my car, thank you very much. But what if we talk about walkable communities and the benefits of having walkable communities, knowing your neighbor more, being more secure because you know your neighbor? What if we talk about the convenience of being closer to the necessities that you need, and then being able to support local businesses, small businesses, more rather than larger multinationals. So these benefits go far beyond just climate change. If people take their bikes to work more often, there's oodles of research out there that shows the connection between cycling to work and increased levels of health. And so be thinking about co-benefits when you're thinking about solving these kind of sustainability problems.